Okay, Michèle, does the sort of solution or approach that you describe, does it depend upon convincing the United States, or are they inevitably going to be an opposition, and that the sorts of approaches that you're describing will run up against the Americans as oppositionists and hostile?
This is why I describe the restructuring of the UN, because it's possible with the UN as opposed to the EU. You can bring there is an article there, I think it's 4th 27, where those who are actually not allowing natural justice by vetoing something that they are already very much involved with, there is an article there that would permit the UN to actually set aside the concept of the US interfering with international justice. It has a privileged veto, which it has no business exacting, if the UN were being conducted in the right way. It's about education. It's about people finding out the truth.
So what you're saying is that we've already established that your perspective is that Israel is just not for negotiating.
A criminal rogue state.
I understand, but the US, given that its relationship is one that you would say is a country that has to be bypassed in this, rather than any effort to engage.
Well, it needs democracy in America. These poor Arabs who think they want the democracy of the West. We don't have democracy because all presidential candidates have to be pro-Zionist. There's no democracy.
Okay.
We have to have the people find out the truth. That's why I say 191 nations could be approached to find out.
Yes.
America is just one of those nations.
I understand. But then, so too in the way that you have described, so too are most of the European states in that camp as well. So you're not only building up opposition within the United States, but also within Europe, for all sorts of reasons.
But the only reason is that people are afraid. We have to get over the fear barrier. There are many people who are not Jew-ish in behavior, in greed and vanity. There are many people who want real truth, who are sympathetic toward the Palestinians, who do see that these inter-gentile wars, all of these wars on Iraq, Libya and so on, are absolute madness.
So you want Gaddafi to be in power?
I would love Gaddafi to be in power, and I wish that the Iranians and the Libyans would solve this impasse between them, because I believe it was a false flag operation to achieve exactly what this unity has been achieved in the Arab Muslim world. We must do like Khomeini says and have no disunity, none of this Sunni Shia nonsense. There must be unity, and he is not a perfect man. Gaddafi may not have been perfect, but by God, he kept out the predator. He got out the UN and the US bases 42 years out of his country. I wish he would do the same for us. I wish our countries, all of our countries, could get rid of these US and US military bases. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. He did that. He put his African area as the highest living standard now. His Green Book was brilliant. It was democracy as opposed to the nonsense we have. We have been lied to. We have been lied about him. We have been lied about Iran.
So
we have been lied about
So Gaddafi's human rights.
We get the human rights from the Zionist press. I don't believe the Zionist press. The only thing I believe is when we hear one drop, one crumb of unbiased. On the Russia Today, we heard Libyans in Tripoli saying we are afraid to be behind our leader.
Okay. Wafik, what I want to do is to come back to the Palestinian issue and the United Nations, because in the next few weeks we could see a US veto for reasons that you have already outlined. What do you think the consequences of all this is going to be? You've already said it's a mistake on the part of the Palestinians to bring this, but it may well happen anyway. What's going to play out in
I think
in
it may play out in Arab Spring way, that the gamble may backfire on Abbas himself and is removed. The other thing we have to remember about in Arab world level, there is no doubt some people will be very unhappy and probably go on demonstrations and agitations, and there'll be some problems, as it happened into the Israeli embassy in Cairo, which again, it was a sort of warning sign what can come, particularly Islamists. There is opportunists going to make use of what happened, that like some elements, Salafis, Muslim Brotherhood, and some of the left, what they call the Arab left, because it's very confusing when I say the left, because it's not the same term like the left in Europe, and that they're going to certainly use this for their own advantage in the forthcoming elections in Egypt. I think it's going to ferment a lot of problems. The other side, Israel, particularly someone like Netanyahu, and he's hard right, as we know, he will be slightly or more harder than what we see him today.
And that's as a consequence of the fact that this could well make the Israelis feel even more isolated than they already are.
It's partly isolated, partly it will harden its position.
Yes.
The United States itself and other European countries may take as well a stronger view. So I think in the whole it will cause a delay and the problems.
Okay. What I detect is that quite often in these sorts of situations, we get the message loud and clear from the Americans: don't do this because it will only make the Israelis harder aligned and more isolated, etc. And then in another situation, let's take, just as an example, I don't want to focus on it, but just as an example, do this to the Iranians and isolate them because that will make them cave in. And there seems to be a completely different analysis for exactly the same strategy. So why is it that putting pressure on Israel in whatever way, this motion or some other way of putting pressure on Israel will make them more hardline and a solution less likely, and yet we seem to think that we can put pressure in other ways on Gaddafi's Libya or whatever, and then that raises the gambit, and we might yet get a shift or a change, as we've seen in Libya.
Well, it is very, very important, very big question, and very, very hard to answer actually in a lot of ways. But I think that there's too much difference between Netanyahu and Gaddafi. Netanyahu is an elected premier, a democratic state.
It's not a democratic state.
I know you may disagree.
You fell right into that one.
I know I'm going.
4 million
I know I am running into trap now.
That is not how you have a democracy.
I know I'm running into trap. But nonetheless, that's what everybody sees, or at least the majority of people see.
I mean, it's a horrible thing to compare those two. Nothing could be more opposite, other than Khomeini himself. That would be a very big opposite. And we should learn from him to have unity with the Arabs.
So you want to learn from Khomeini and you want to learn from Gaddafi?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because they are very similar in as much as they protected the predator from interfering in their countries. And that's what all governments should do. Never mind democracy.
We can talk about Gaddafi
good leadership.
Good
leadership. Never mind democracy.
Okay. What I want to do is to focus on the subject. How do we relate to Israel, and particularly over the next few weeks?
I think
with animosity, for heaven's sake, it's criminal.
I've heard that.
The situation is not static, and Netanyahu is not going to be there forever.
Yes.
His like will be there for as long as we cower.
I mean, there will be Israel is a democracy, and there's a change.
Change of generals. That's all it is.
Change of generals, and change of governments, and at least. You could hold them to account in a way.
When? How would you want to do that? they cannot be held to account because
I'm
they
not
are
defending
a
Israel. I'm defending reality.
Yes.
The reality is that we all say it's criminal and it's over. There's nothing complicated about it.
Yes, I understand. So your question is absolutely appropriate. How is it that we hold Israel to account if Abbas's solution, be it or his strategy of trying to go through the UN, if that's not the right approach? How do we get Israel to play a reasonable game here, rather than the game that we have seen them play over the last 2 years?
It's an oxymoron.
I think
I know that's what you've said, but
I think first thing that we have to really, rushing to United Nations, for example, is a big mistake.
Yes.
So we got to move out of this now.
Yes.
But so that's going to take a bit of time to bring the hard right in Israel as well into shape. Well, you see, politics is 2-3 sides, so I'm talking about they're not going to
into shape.
What I mean to accept
has been
negotiation,
an exercise to discover.
to accept a negotiation. I'm a pragmatic
What
and a practical man.
What
and
evidence do you have that they have ever done this? Wafik, what evidence are you basing this idea upon? It is never. It's ignored every UN resolution.
I read.
It wants Nile to the Euphrates. It's a criminal entity. It's never negotiated one
I wouldn't
inch.
use the word criminal.
What are you basing
I wouldn't
your
use the
idea
word
on?
criminal. I think it's
Criminal?
not. No.
How is criminal not the description
Is
for
it-
the
I tell you-
blueprint of 1895 to genocide Palestine?
Okay, I read history very well. I must say something.
see it in
The
our
Israelite school in the 19th century, what you're talking about that, the first school was Israelite, and the mayor of Jerusalem at the time, Mufti al-Quds, the Mufti, Grand Mufti, he was a pupil there, and his father used to borrow money from the Israeli bank in Jerusalem.
This is how they have got us all into war.
So he studied there, his students there.
But you know about usury. Islam teaches us about usury in the way that Christianity has failed to. It is all about usury.
Now, and we're talking about now political reality.
That is political reality. Economics, usury is the reason why we are in the state that we're in.
The political reality is Israel is the strongest strongest country in the Middle East. The political
Only
reality.
because we allow it. We can stop it tomorrow.
Well, we've gotten so many wars with them. Egypt has lost about 100,000 people with Israel.
Because they didn't understand what Israel was about.
If I am the father,
I've just witnessed a debate about strength and what. Israel is the strongest country in the region, but that is pitting one military against another military in a conventional fight, just as in 1967 et al. If there was another war like that tomorrow, Israel would win, with or without its nuclear weapons. But that's not the conflict that we're involved in at the moment. It's a conflict which is asymmetrical, missiles and the like. It's a conflict, more importantly, of conversation, of ideas, of the mind. So I guess Michèle has outlined very ably a vision that would be attractive to a lot of people.
Like
a lot of people in the region.
Michèle wants Israel to be abolished from the map.
Absolutely.
Is that
so?
right?
That is not.